So the Democrats don't like it that Republicans expelled 2 unruly legislators. I'll tell you what, Republicans should expel more of them. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another Declaration of Truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. This week, a certain state legislature finally took a step most legislatures have rarely, if ever, taken, at least since the war between the states. The Tennessee House of Representatives expelled 2 members for disorderly conduct and inciting visitors to disrupt legislative proceedings. These expulsions struck even official Washington like thunderclaps. They provoked a firestorm of criticism, and in fact the criticism, at least on one side, is ill-taken. Did these critics make light of the offenses that the expelled members committed? Yes. But that's not the worst of it. I call on Republican supermajorities everywhere to expel more of their colleagues for infidelity to the Constitution. Before I go any further, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I've chosen for today, which reads, as we're redefining everything, this is a cordless hole punch. I'm wearing this mainly because the Second Amendment and deliberate attempts to flout it are at the heart of the matter today. This affects not only the Second Amendment, but also the First, the Third, the Fourth, the Fifth, the Sixth, on and on and on. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click on the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. All right. Let me have your attention, all you Republicans out there, if you please. You're talking about what? You're talking about how the one legislator whom you let off the hook called you racist anyway. True, but incidental. Let's talk about something important. Let's begin with this. When may a legislature expel a member? Surprise! The U.S. Constitution prescribes no definite standards of evidence on which either chamber of Congress may expel a member. Instead, Article 1, Section 5 reads in relevant part, each House of Congress may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and, with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. Unquote, the Constitution. The Senate of the United States has expelled 15 of its members since its inception. It expelled 14 of the 15 in the first 2 years of the war between the states for support of the Confederacy. Before then, the Senate expelled Senator William Blount of Tennessee for conspiracy to incite war against Spanish-owned Florida and Louisiana. That plot was tantamount to treason, and the Senate treated it as such. In fact, the House of Representatives first impeached Blount, but the Senate dismissed the impeachment for lack of House jurisdiction. But the Senate then expelled Blount on its own authority. The Senate has never again, since the war between the states, expelled any of its members, although many of them have resigned instead. In fact, maybe some of you remember the 1939 movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. James Stewart plays a senator facing expulsion for utterly specious reasons. That film pegged those Congress critters, and especially senators, so well that when the movie played a sneak preview to the Congress, half of them walked out. Maybe because they knew perfectly well that they deserved expulsion. But I digress. The House has expelled 5 of its members, 3 during the war between the states And after that, the House expelled Michael Myers of Pennsylvania for his role in the abscam business, and Jim Trafficant of Ohio for 10 different counts, all of them involving some form of financial chicane. Have state legislatures ever expelled their members? Yes. The New York State Senate and Assembly, for example, have expelled or tried many, usually for fraud, bribery, or some such. But on April 1st, 1920, the Republican Speaker and Assembly majority expelled 5 members of the Socialist Party of America. They charged that the 5 could not be consistent and loyal assemblymen while belonging to a party calling itself socialist. And they were not April fooling. But the Assembly did not permanently disqualify them, so they stood for re-election and won. After that, the Assembly expelled 3 of them all over again. They expelled 3 of them all over again. And the other 2 resigned in protest. Now that is likely the one case in which a legislative chamber expelled a member for actual or potential infidelity to the Constitution of the United States or of any state, short of actual treason. Tellingly, today's Democratic Party promotes programs and associations worse than the Socialist Party of America ever dreamed of doing. In fact, Gus Hall, the head of the Communist Party of the USA, has been heard to accuse the Democrats of plagiarism. And I'm only half kidding. More relevant to the index cases, Tennessee's legislature has expelled only 2 members since the war between the states. That is, it expelled only 2 before April 6, 2023. And now, the history of the Tennessee 3, what they did, why they did it, and why 3 Republican Tennessee House members wanted to expel them. On March 27, 2023, one Audrey Idan Hale, 28 years old, shot her way into the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. She, or as her supporters insist, he, or maybe they, or Z, or some such thing, killed the pastor's daughter, 1 pupil who tried to summon aid, and a 3rd pupil for an unknown reason. All 3 children were 9 years old. She also killed the headmistress, a substitute teacher, and a janitor. But 1 member of staff, hiding under a desk, did summon aid. 2 Metro Nashville Police officers entered the building, made their way to the sounds of gunfire, brought Hale to battle, and killed her. At least 1 influencer has all but suggested their tactics should be required reading at American police academies. His name is Brandon Tatum, and I've left a link in the description to his video describing their heroism, and more to the point, how they stopped Hale for good and before she could kill anyone else. Now, 2 supremely ironic kinds of protests broke out after this episode. First, transgender activists counted Hale as a victim, along with her victims. We now know that she, a likely disgruntled alumna of the Covenant School, began planning this attack for months. Some victim. In fact, she was probably under the influence of testosterone, which is part of a woman's transition, and that increased her aggressiveness. Second, the usual advocates for gun control suggested that with stricter gun laws, those 3 pupils and 3 staff of the school might still be alive. The irony here is that the perpetrator, as a transgender, was their ideological ally. Now, I'm not saying that those gun grabbers had anything to do with her planning an attack on the school, but I do say that they are not a bit sorry for the deaths of those pupils or that staff, because the victims were Christians, and they think Christians are deluded and, as such, a positive menace to society. And that irony was and still is utterly lost on the gun control advocates. We now come to March 30th, 2023. The Tennessee House was then debating House Bill 322, a bill to enhance school safety or security. Among its recommendations was providing for armed and trained resource officers in schools. But of course that wasn't good enough for the gun control advocates. They protested the ready availability of what they called weapons of war to civilians. Now, I can take that only one way. They seek a regime in which no person, except a law enforcement officer, an active duty military service member, a very important person, or his bodyguard, shall own, carry, or so much as touch, much less discharge, a firearm. And that flatly violates the Constitution, particularly its Second Amendment. Never mind, screamed the protesters. Which is more important, they asked, kids or adult toys, as one person calls firearms. Except that they propose not to repeal the Second Amendment, but simply to ignore it. Justice Clarence Thomas must be clearing his throat to read these accounts. He, after all, delivered the opinion of the court in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, 597 U.S. blank 2022. The blank is there because volume 597 of the United States Supreme Court case series hasn't yet gone to galley proofs. On the day in question, gun control advocates filled the gallery of the Tennessee House. Now, at first, they maintained a polite silence, as the House rules require. But then, Representatives Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, and Gloria Johnson marched to the well of the House without permission. Then they raised bullhorns and led the gallery in a chant of, "No action, no peace! No action, no peace!" The House Speaker then called a recess. So on Monday's session, Representatives Bud Hulsey, Gino Bulso, and Andrew Farmer, all Republicans, filed resolutions to expel all three. But the grounds were not disrespect of the Constitution. Rather, the accusers accused the Tennessee Three of disorderly behavior, a phrase they might have lifted straight from the U.S. Constitution. Then on Thursday, April 6th, the Tennessee House took up each resolution in turn. The House voted to expel Jones first, 72-25. Why pick on Jones first? Maybe because Jones had in fact been in trouble for disorderly behavior before. I have a link in the description to a tweet describing how much trouble he'd been in. Did you know that he was arrested 14 times before that last little episode? Then the House voted to expel Pearson, 69-26. Now, you had to figure that Jones was out, so 2 Republicans flipped and another one absented himself. Then, when the time came to expel Representative Johnson, the House failed, with 4 fewer votes to expel. I don't know how many votes to retain. But this 4-vote difference led one commentator to count, and I quote, 4 weak Republicans. I have a link in the description to that person's tweet saying just that. But now we know why the Tennessee House failed to expel Gloria Johnson. Representative Jody Barrett voted to retain Johnson after first promising to vote to expel. Jack Posobiec of Human Events got that from a Mr. Piffwitz, and I have his tweet telling everybody what happened. Then, apparently, Barrett turned off his Twitter notifications, a clear indication of his mortifying embarrassment. And I have a link in the description to someone observing just that. Poso, of course, was furious. And I have a link in the description to his tweet, quoting another tweet saying that it just didn't look right to expel Jones and Pearson but not expel Johnson. Poso said, quote, "Exactly. That's why I lit up the Tennessee Republican Party for not removing her. They claim it's about fairness, and then don't understand why the entire media is lying about them today. And then they'll whine about double standards. They're so close, but not quite there yet," unquote, Jack Posobiec. And what do I mean by lying? This is the most stunning irony of all. Representative Johnson actually accused her Republican colleagues of racism for expelling Jones and Pearson, both black, but not her, who is white. She should have known better than to make a statement like that. In blunt fact, she cut deals to persuade enough Republicans, including Jody Barrett, not to expel her. And she could cut those deals because she's been in the House the longest of the three and knew whose pork barrel riders to promise to support and perhaps whose arms to twist. Hold that thought, because I'm coming back to it. First, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, the employment issues, unexpected changes in life left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges, but if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. And now, the votes to expel Jones and Pearson clearly have driven the political left over the edge. Andy No and one commentator calling himself I Mean Therefore I Am embedded photographs of 20 tweets of people saying to burn Tennessee down. One of these would-be incendiaries is Anita Blanchard, an associate professor of psychological and organization science at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Then another user named E. Everett says, quote, "The Tennessee Republicans did the right thing. These reps do not have the right to force legislation by bringing in mobs and using bullhorns to shout down the majority. The use of force proves that the plebs need guns. As long as the ruling class is violent, the people need guns," close quote. I'm not too terribly worried about the threats. The post-millennial called them threats of arson, but they were totally non-specific. But one of them says, and I quote, "Do we really need Tennessee? Burn that state to the ground and let nature have it back," close quote. Sounds like somebody wants to rewild Tennessee. It reminds me of a poem titled Anecdote of the Jar by Wallace Stevens. Talks about placing a jar in Tennessee and how it comes to dominate the land because it's so strange. Of course, that doesn't apply to Tennessee today, and it hasn't for a long time. Interestingly, Representative Barrett pleaded yesterday afternoon that Gloria Johnson's attorney had come to him and said that the resolution had factual inaccuracies. I have a link to his tweet, and I urge you to read his statement for yourselves. Basically, he repudiates the racism charge, except you can't repudiate that charge because the way these people throw it around, racist, is identical to white. But he also said that her legal eagle said that the resolution had defects in it, and so Barrett was going to listen for evidence of specific misconduct as the resolution described it. Well, Poso was angry at all get out at that, and of course I have a link in the description of his tweet saying, quote, "And she turned around and spat in your face, smearing you as a racist. Now, because of your poor judgment, the entire Tennessee Republican Party is being attacked by the full force of the national establishment. How did your fairness work out for you with the left?" Unquote Poso. And he wasn't the only one to say something like that. Representative Johnson did, in fact, threaten to sue the House if it voted to expel her and the other two. So, perhaps Representative Barrett felt that he could, by voting to retain, deny her standing to sue. That is, if we can believe his statement. Because if he cut a deal he would scarcely want to admit that, so he might concoct that whole thing just to hide that. So let's dismiss his statement as valueless without corroboration from the attorney, who in any case would have to explain why Tennessee's courts would have any jurisdiction. As is true of the U.S. House of Representatives, the Tennessee House is the sole judge of member conduct. Now, I have links in the description to 4 criticisms of the expulsions from former Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, former President Barack Obama, current Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and President Biden. They speak of fascism, erosion of civility and democratic norms, and acts without precedent. Well, if they are without precedent, maybe that's the problem. But also, those 4 all want to see gun control. But that bit about politically persecuting political opponents didn't impress people. Other influencers pointed out that Democrats are now politically prosecuting their political opponents. 2 other commentators made largely empty threats. I have links to 3 of their tweets in all, posting pictures of Jones and Pearson and holding them up like some kind of martyr. But so far, everyone seems to be missing a larger point. And what is that? Just this. The real reason why the Tennessee House should have expelled Johnson, as well as Jones and Pearson, has nothing to do with their behavior. As bad as that behavior was, it was incidental to their real transgression, which is flagrant disrespect for the Constitution of the United States that they all swore to support and defend. That also applies to former Representative Kinzinger, former President Obama, and Representative Tlaib, and especially President Biden. And by the way, Johnson indulged in some disgusting vos quoque on the floor, according to the Post-Millennial. She spoke of members who were inappropriate with children, discharged bodily fluids into one another's chairs, and illegally prescribed drugs to relatives and associates. The Tennessee House failed to expel any of these members, Johnson said. Now, without further specifics on these cases, I cannot verify any of them, whether they even exist. But if she could cite any such cases, then shame on the Tennessee House for not expelling members for acts of that kind. In any case, cases like that are incompetent, irrelevant, and immaterial. The Federalist said bluntly that Democrats have already tried to expel members for opposing ideology only. It includes photos of tweets from Representative Alejandro Ocasio-Cortez of New York, former Secretary of Labor Robert M. Reich, and many others. All call for the expulsion of Senators Ted Cruz of Texas and Josh Hawley of Missouri for challenging presidential election results on January 6, 2021. Also, Representative Jimmy Gomez of California introduced a resolution to expel Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. The behavior of all these Democrats, the Tennessee Three, their supporters, and the others I just named, shows disrespect for the Constitution. Every member of Congress and of any state legislature must swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And the federal oath is definitely stronger: against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So, if any member of any American legislature doesn't like the Second Amendment, let him either A, introduce a congressional joint resolution to repeal it if he is a member of Congress, or B, vote to ratify any repeal amendment that passes, should that ever happen. But the Tennessee Three propose to introduce legislation that can have but one ultimate goal. That goal is the confiscation of all firearms in non-police, non-military, non-VIP, and non-bodyguard hands. And they dare introduce such legislation in the face of the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In theory, The Tennessee Constitution empowers its legislature to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime, but the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution and the 2nd and 14th Amendment supersede any such power. The Tennessee Three knew that, but tried to intimidate their foes into aiding and abetting a constitutional violation. And that is the offense for which the Tennessee House ought to expel all the Tennessee Three. And it is reason enough for Congress and any state legislature to expel any member who introduces such legislation. But me no buts. I know what you're going to say, that the legislation that Representatives Jones, Pearson, and Johnson recommended did not in and of itself call for confiscation. That, ladies and gentlemen, is quibbling. Democrats have always practiced incrementalism. You introduce a bill to go only so far, and then introduce another bill to go farther, and then farther, and then farther. For that reason, I judge the intent of any piece of legislation by its logical end point. Senator Dianne Feinstein of California brazenly revealed that endpoint best or worst of all in an interview on 59.5 Minutes Too Late. I quote, "If I could have gotten 51 votes in the Senate of the United States for an outright ban, picking up every one of them, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in, I would have done it. I could not do that. The votes weren't here." Unquote, Dianne Feinstein. And I have a link in the description to a video of her saying just that. If the Senate had any character, they would have expelled Senator Feinstein for making that statement alone. How dare she contemplate confiscating firearms by law in defiance of the Constitution? Nor is the Second Amendment the only part of the Constitution that Democratic-controlled legislatures routinely ignore. At least when Congress wanted to create an income tax, they introduced a constitutional amendment. Misguided as that was, it was the proper way to do it. Today's Democrats want to legislate away our constitutional rights without regard to constitutional text or even current Supreme Court case law. So I say, expel more Democrats. Those New York Assemblymen in 1920 had the right idea. They faced a problem similar to what we face today. No person can remain consistent and loyal to the Constitution or even to America itself and still remain in the Democratic Party. Even measures like one pending in Florida to bar any party that ever advocated for slavery are not necessary. Supermajorities can and should act now. Expel any members who disrespect constitutional rights and the Constitution itself. Links in the description to the article, to the Officer Tatum's glowing review of how those Metro Nashville Police officers did their job, to the tweet about Justin Jones' prior brushes with the authorities over his disorderly conduct, to the 4-week Republicans tweet, to Poso talking about Jody Barrett's last-minute switcheroo, and the other user talking about Barrett turning off his Twitter notices, to Poso denouncing the failure to expel Johnson, to 2 tweets that between them cover those activists talking about burning Tennessee down, to Jody Barrett's statement, if you can believe it, on the non-expulsion of Johnson and Poso cleaning his clock over that, to the reactions from Kinzinger, Obama, Tlaib, and Biden, to the 3 big talk tweets about remembering Jones and Pearson, to the video of Senator Feinstein saying Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to my Second Amendment playlist and to both those other 2 videos I mentioned from Officer Tatum and the one quoting Senator Feinstein. This is Terry A. Horrible delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.